everyone. Stacy Hunjady, your mortgage maven with Arbor Financial. Thank you for joining me to discuss housing supply and demand. We'll get started. The number one law of economics is supply and demand, and it truly applies in housing. The more demand and less supply, prices, like we have seen, get pressured higher. So, is there a change on the horizon? Is there something going on that would spoil that dynamic? There's a lot of speculation that there's going to be a lot of inventory coming on the market. We know the buyer demand is being tempered right now because of higher interest rates and higher home prices. But there has been such a shortage of housing and so much overwhelming demand. Is it enough to stem the tide? And is it enough to reverse course? Let's examine this together. So first off, when we take a look at housing supply versus demand, we want to look at the demand side of it first. So the way to look at demand in housing is by households being formed. So what is a household formation exactly? If someone leaves the shelter of mom and dad and they go out and get their own place, whether it's buying or renting, that is a new household formation. Or if you have a couple that live together but now split up, and one of the individuals is now branching off and gets their own place, that's also a formation. The distinction here over someone who is just selling their home and moving is that these people don't have a home to sell. So they're occupying a new property without relinquishing one, without selling one or leaving one behind. So therefore, they are absorbing the supply. So this is demand. This is a household formation. On the red line, you'll see in the United States right now, there is over 1.4 million households being formed. That's a pretty big number. This huge upswing and downswing is the COVID up and down. It's relatively high. In fact, it's above the average that you see here in green. So it's a pretty big number that you can see in formation. There's still quite a bit of this going on today. Now, when we look at supply, a lot of people point to housing starts. Well, where does the supply come from? It can't be from an existing individual who lives in a home because as they sell their home, they need to buy another one. So that leaves it inventory neutral. So supply comes from new construction. Many people look at housing starts, and that's a logical place to start. But if you look at housing starts, which are currently 1.7 million, you have to account for the fact that every year about 100,000 homes get destroyed, retired, or replaced. So if you're starting at 1.7 million, it means that we'll be left with 1.6 million homes after you replace those houses being retired or destroyed. So with 1.6 million new supply coming into the market, and if you take a look at the demand, there's about 1.4 million units that are needed. So then it looks like there's an apparent surplus of 200,000. The thing of it is, if you look at the housing starts like most people do, that includes putting a shovel in the ground. Well, you can't exactly move into a house when there's just a shovel in the ground. So we don't want to look at starts. We want to look at completions because that's what you can move into. And there is 1.3 million of those that are completed. And then for the destroyed homes, you subtract 100,000, and that leaves 1.2 million in new supply. And household formations are 1.4 million. So guess what? Even though the supply is already very low, it's getting worse. 200,000 less homes than the demand, in which is very supportive of the pricing that we're seeing. And even if that were to reverse, and even if we were to get 200,000 more homes, there's such a hole already that we may be 2 million homes short from equilibrium right now. But it will take a while to eat into that. But for now, we're going into greater shortage situation. Now we'll take a look at existing home inventory. Existing home inventory has been decreasing throughout the years. Now you see 1 million homes in the market right now, and many people are saying, hey, you know what? We're seeing a lot more inventory come on the market. And you can see on this chart here, so what's going on with existing homes? Why are more coming on the market? Well, this happens, if you notice, every single year around springtime. So think about it. When you were a kid in school, and in the middle of a school year, if a new kid came into class, many of the friendships and cliques were already formed, so it made it a little more difficult for the new child coming in. Parents are cognizant of that, and what they would prefer to do is get their child starting at the beginning of the school year versus the middle of the school year, so they can assimilate much easier. Well, in order to do that, that means that they have to have closed on their home during the summer months, which means that they would have had to gone shopping for the home, or if they're selling a home, put their home up for sale in the springtime to prepare, which is why you typically see an increase in the spring. Now, that's not always the case, and we've been in a really crazy, hot, unusual market, but it's also not just because the flowers are in bloom, folks. People are planning ahead to have everything aligned for the school year, if at all possible. So when you take a look every year and you see a similar pattern, notice the trend. But if you look here, back in 2018, the highs, and into 2019, and then before 2020, the highs are much higher. Well, now from 2020 to current, the highs are lower. So from 2020 to 2021 and 22, the highs are even at lower points, and the low is lower. But there's more to this story, and this is where it gets really interesting. See these 1 million homes for sale? That's inventory. But what's counted in the inventory is something very interesting. Out of the 1 million homes for sale, it includes those under contract. And right now, the market has been so hot that 60% of the homes that are not yet closed are already under contract. So if I'm shopping for a home, I wouldn't be able to purchase a home that's already under contract with someone else, right? I need to get one that's not. That means that there's only 400,000 homes in the entire country to pick from. A country of 330 million people with 130 million households. That's some pretty slim pickings. So as we went over, sorry my slide didn't catch up, the inventory, the under contract, active listings, and then now just to give you some context here as to what 400,000 homes looks like historically, you can take a look. It's very, very little. Now, while you might see your active listings at 1.5 million, another aspect is that represents 75% of the total market. So if 25% at that point in time, there's 2 million homes for sale. 25% of them are under contract, 75% available. Today, 1 million homes in existing home inventory, 60% are under contract, only 40% available. So homes are selling very quickly. And as far as there's a lot more inventory on the market, the answer is no. A little more, but from the lowest point ever, just 33,000 active listings have increased from them. And again, it's typical to see this during the spring home buying season. But it isn't as if there's a huge rush of inventory coming in the marketplace. Our markets and pockets of the market is going to be different depending upon where you are in the country and the state. We're talking about national numbers here, so every real estate market's a little bit different. But by and large, there's still a lack of supply. And while demand is definitely waning because of higher interest rates and because of higher home prices, we agree, but there's still enough activity to support the prices. So while the increases in home prices may not be at the levels that they were, it isn't as if the ability isn't there in this marketplace. I don't think, based on what the experts are saying, that we're going to see enormous price drops. You might see some listings come back down to earth where sellers who put unrealistic prices start reducing prices of their listing. But it is going to be on a year-over-year basis where you're going to see drops. And there's a difference between listing prices coming to realistic places versus a decline in home values. Those are different things, and a lot of people mix those up. And another reason is vacancies. When your home is vacant and you're carrying two houses, so you've purchased a new home and the home that you're selling is vacant, you look at those carrying costs. You have your mortgage, if you had mortgage financing on the property insurance, taxes, and homeowners association dues if that applies. And also the maintenance. Grass still has to be cut, electricity is still on, and things of that nature have to be paid. It can sometimes be several $1,000s every month. So it's easy to justify in the back of your mind and say, hey, you know what? Let me just drop the price and get rid of this extra burden and expense because the carrying costs are killing me. And that's where you see price reductions. And that's what you had in 2007 when about 3% of the entire housing stock was vacant. That's a lot. Today it's at an all-time low at 0.8%. So there isn't the incentive to say, hey, I'm carrying two houses here. I've got to unload this thing and I don't care if I take a price hit for it. So you just don't have that type of price dropping incentive from the sellers. It looks like overall the housing market should remain pretty healthy. Thank you for taking the time today to join me. And don't forget, I am here for all your purchase financing needs, refinance, and just any questions in general. Stacy Hunjady, your loan maven with Arbor Financial Group.